distinguished speakers, moderator, participants, ladies and gentlemen, from Bogor, Indonesia, a very good afternoon. Thank you all for finding time and visiting today's event, the Agriculture Working Group and Development Working Group joint webinar, Enhancing Digital Agriculture and Rural Finance for Food Security. In 2022, Indonesia has a privilege as the presidency of G20 with the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger. One of the primary topics in G20 presidency is digital and economic transformation. This two-day webinar is expected to be an opportunity to share insights, experiences, and lessons from G20 member countries on various critical challenges related to digital agriculture and rural finance. During the process of preparation of this webinar, we received tremendous support from FAO, OECD, IVAD, IRIA, and other international representatives. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I am Sahat Pasaribu, your host for today. Allow me to greet the Secretary General, Ministry of Agriculture, Dr. Kasdi Subagiono, Deputy Minister for Development Funding of the Ministry of National Development Planning, or Bappenas, Dr. Snyder Siahaan, Chief Economist FAO, Dr. Maximo Torero, our moderator, Mr. William Tang of Beanstalk, and distinguished speakers for today, Mr. Brian King, Platform Leader Big Data, CGIAR, Mr. Krishnan Palasana, Digital Green India, and Mr. Ventachalam Anbumoshi, Research Strategy and Innovation of Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. This morning, we recorded more than 250 participants that have registered and joining this webinar from various institutions and different countries, including those from international organizations. Thank you very much for your time in joining this event. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to inform you the agenda for today. The first agenda is the opening session, and second is the webinar session led by our moderator. Without further ado, to kick off the webinar, I would like to invite Dr. Sudi Mardianto, Director of the Indonesian Center for Agricultural, Socio-Economic and Policy Studies, Ministry of Agriculture, Indonesia, to deliver the webinar notes. Dr. Sudi Mardianto, please take the screen.
Thank you, Mr. Sahat. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and greetings to all of us. His Excellency Secretary General of the Ministry of Agriculture, Bapak Dr. Kasdi Subagiono, His Excellency Deputy Minister for Development Funding of Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas, Bapak Dr. Snyder Siahaan, distinguished speakers, resource persons and moderators, honorable representative of G20 member countries and international organizations, and all participants of this webinar. Praise and gratitude I pray to the presence of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, God Almighty, who has bestowed His mercy and grace on us. This is a great opportunity for me to be with all of you. We are proud to host this webinar and we are very happy to see you at this precious event. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you. Ladies and gentlemen and all participants, currently the digital agriculture technologies are widely used for enhancing productivity. As support digital infrastructure, basic data system for rural area is required to facilitate agricultural services and technologies to assess farm finance and management. Digital farming technologies have been developed to address the growing concern over agricultural sustainability. With all challenges faced by stakeholders in rural areas, the availability of capital resources needs to be inclusively managed to meet the right balance between economic growth, poverty reduction, and environmental sustainability. Financial accessibility to support rural development is highly recognized as a key condition for promoting agricultural and rural sector development. Ladies and gentlemen and all participants, the main objective of this webinar is to share knowledge and experience to enhance digital agriculture for food security. lesson learned on digital technology application in agriculture and best practices on agricultural investment and rural finance would be the specific objective to achieve through this webinar. Acknowledging the strategic role of digital technology and advancement and urgency to address financing gap, this joint webinar will focalize on two main issues, which are digitalization and rural finance, as the two important aspects in harnessing agricultural development, with specific attention to the perspective of developing countries, least developed countries, and small island development states. I appreciate the contribution of all speakers with their thoughts and ideas, and thankful to all distinguished audience who I hope could share their experience through this webinar. On behalf of Agriculture Working Group and Development Working Group, I would like to thank the organizing committee who have worked hard in the preparation of this webinar. I would like to deliver my appreciation to all our international partners and local colleges who have cooperated very closely to help arrange this webinar. Finally, while exchanging our ideas through presentation and discussion and recharging our view about other experience, I would like to close this webinar note with sincere thanks to all of you. Enjoy the webinar. May I now invite His Excellency Dr. Kasdi Subagiono, Secretary General of the Ministry of Agriculture, to deliver his opening remarks. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sudi Mardianto. Honorable speakers, moderators, participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we would like to invite Dr. Kasdi Subagiono, Chair, Agriculture Working Group, and Secretary General of the Ministry of Agriculture, Indonesia, to deliver the opening remarks of the webinar. Dr. Kasdi Subagiono, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greeting and good afternoon. Distinguished speakers and resource persons, honorable colleagues representing G20 member countries and international organizations, all participants of this important webinar. On these precious occasions, I would like to express my praise and gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, God Almighty, who has bestowed His mercy and grace on us so that we are in a good health. We should be grateful because only with His permission can we organize this important webinar. His Excellency Minister of Agriculture and all participants, it is our honor to host this webinar and bring a new perspective on the digitalization of agriculture following the new trends of modern farming practices. As we know, the application of digital technology in agriculture lately has played a very important role in improving agriculture performance. The application of digital technology in rural finance is also increasing and has been instrumental towards rural transformation. State of the art of the G20 member countries in the application of digital technologies in agriculture as well as in rural finance may have wide gaps with different standards. Each G20 member countries need to thoroughly assess their positive where modern technologies can lead to more effective agriculture practices. It is our concern to narrow the gap in the use of modern technology between developed countries and underdeveloped countries or small island countries adapted to the available agriculture infrastructure. It is hoped that this webinar will address such a situation for the benefits of all. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, in Indonesia, the Agriculture War Room of the Ministry of Agriculture is designed to directly control the implementation of agriculture development throughout the country. Data and information are collected from various sources and visualized into a dashboard to monitor various agriculture indicators, including production processes and price dynamics. The Agriculture War Room is connected with the Strategic Command for Agriculture Development in its sub-district as well as Kostrada in district cities and Kostrawil in the province level. The Kostratani office is organized by utilizing technology advanced to map potential problems and record agriculture development down to the field level. The Agriculture War Room use modern facilities to guide the entire agricultural development process chain, such as strategic planning for specific crops, monitoring production processes, and addressing issues related to agricultural development. The digitalization of agriculture in Indonesia now become an integral part of national agriculture development. Satellite-based technology is being developed to monitor the development of plant growth. Climate information, advice on the use of rice seeds, and fertilizer recommendations are now accessible by farmers through the planting calendar application. The current and future conditions cannot be separated from the need for the use of digital technology. Data used in agriculture were well analyzed, leading to better and smart decisions in farming. Therefore, in the near future, it is obvious that this digital-based agriculture will be controlled and developed by our millennial farmers. All participants, as a side event during the G20 Indonesian presidency, we consider this webinar very strategic because it takes important and timely issues and involves many experts from various countries and from leading international institutions. We really appreciate your presence and participation with your ideas through this event. It should be remembered that your valuable contribution today is directed towards advancing better agricultural performance, enhancing rural transformation, and improving the quality of lives and global communities. In this opportunity, I would like to specifically express my sincere appreciation to the development working group for such a wonderful cooperation with the Agriculture Working Group since its initial planning and up to the implementation of this precious webinar. My thankful also extended to the Center for Agriculture, Socio-Economic and Policy Studies for organizing this webinar. In particular, I would like to appreciate our partnerships with international organizations in assessing the organizer in the preparation of this webinar. Finally, I hope that this important event will be followed by subsequent meetings with initiative to practically apply the most acceptable modern approaches in agriculture and rural finance. These initiatives can create projects and activities to promote the application of digital technology in agriculture and rural development for the benefits of G20 member countries and the global community. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, our Secretary General. Now I would like to invite Dr. Snyder Siahaan, Chair Development Working Group and Deputy Minister for Development Funding of the Ministry of National Development Planning, Bappenas, Indonesia, to deliver the welcoming address. Dr. Snyder Siahaan, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Pak Sahat. His Excellency, Pak Dr. Kasdi Subagiano, Chair of Agriculture Working Group, Mr. Maximo Chorero Kelen, Chief Economist, FLO, and Dr. Sudi Mardianto, distinguished panelists and participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera buat kita semua. Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, and salam kebajikan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. And it is a great honor for me to welcome you to the joint webinar of the G20 Agriculture Working Group and Development Working Group. First and foremost, let me express my appreciation to the panelists for accepting our invitation to speak at this event. And we'd like also to thank all participants for being here with us today. Colleagues, this event embarks on another important milestone for all of us. For the first time in the G20 history, a joint webinar by the Agriculture Working Group and Development Working Group is held on a topic that is very close to both working groups. This indeed shows that collaboration is no stranger to G20, no stranger, sorry. Last year, we gathered in Matera, Italy for the G20 development and foreign ministers that put forward the Matera Declaration on food security, nutrition and food systems, which strengthened the G20 commitment in contributing to SDG 2, namely end hunger target, through multi-sector actions and policies. With agriculture being a fundamental sector in achieving food security and is a major part in the declaration, the ministers of agriculture also acknowledge Matera Declaration in their communique. The Matera Declaration put a strong emphasis throughout the document on empowering and creating the enabling environment for small-scale and family farmers, as they produce 80% of the world's food in value terms. Also, noting the same urgency, the Agriculture Working Group under the Indonesian G20 presidency aims to promote innovative agripreneurial to improve livelihood of farmers in rural areas as its third priority. Therefore, this joint webinar addresses the most challenging bottleneck faced by small-scale farmers, particularly in rural areas. Among many, we underscored two factors. One is the importance of accelerating digital transformation. Living in this era, the potential of digital technology can no longer be overlooked, yet it remains inaccessible and underutilized. Two is increasing catalytic investments, especially rural financing. With only 10% of rural communities having the access to basic formal financial services, it also creates a gap for capital to reach the agriculture sector. These two are some of the main challenges and to be seen as opportunities faced by farmers in the developing countries. To this end, the Development Working Group and Agriculture Working Group proudly present today's webinar on enhancing digital agriculture and rural finance for food security. We hope this today's webinar that we already designed will enable stakeholders to share the knowledge, experience, lesson learned, and best practices in addressing the above challenges and optimizing the opportunity. Today, we will focus on digital technology application in agriculture, and tomorrow, the discussion will revolve around agricultural investment and rural finance, so that increases the procurement of smallholder producers and could strengthen their access to markets. Ladies and gentlemen, this webinar is not only important for the Development Working Group by being a concrete implementation of Matera declarations. It also enables knowledge sharing to broaden and enrich the discussion to foster the deliverable of this year's Agriculture Working Group. On top of that, it serves as the manifestation of G20 commitment in leading collective and coordination actions at the global level through its leaderships, which hopefully this webinar will create real impacts and benefit the G20 members, developing countries, and beyond. Hence, I would like to reiterate the statement made by Dr. Subagiano and Dr. Mardianto earlier. We are very grateful for having a wide range of panelists joining our sessions, ranging from researchers to practitioners, representing international organizations and the government, bringing the perspective of developed and developing countries. We are optimistic that the joint webinar will be very insightful. And with all that being said, I sincerely thank you all for your precious time and participation in this meeting and look forward to our fruitful discussion. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sihan, our Deputy Minister. We appreciate your inspiring, welcoming speech in this seminar. Now I would like to invite Dr. Maximo Torero, Chief Economist, FAO, to deliver the keynote speech. Dr. Torero, now it is your stage.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation, and it's a pleasure to be here in a topic which is so important on enhancing the use of digital technologies in agriculture and rural finance for improved food security. As you know, you are touching a central topic that started to accelerate enormously in the last decade, but especially after COVID-19 has grown substantially. It's a great pleasure to join you today for this timely discussion, and I hope I can bring some insights on how we can move forward in an inclusive way in the digital transformation that we need to create the agri-food system transformation that we have to implement as soon as possible. Digital technologies are having a profound impact on our economies and societies. They are transforming agriculture and food markets. And this transformation has been accelerated by the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, where we have seen and we are seeing a significant acceleration of the automation process. And in agriculture, a big part of the automation process is based on digital technologies, and then we build over that. In rural areas, digital technologies can be leveraged to address market failures and facilitate the smallholder farmers' access to knowledge and capital integration into markets, thus fostering sustainable outcomes. And there are several number of experiences that has been solidly evaluated on how this can be achieved with the use of digital technologies. Let me give you some examples. Digital technologies can be used to increase access to information, markets, and financial services. At the beginning, we saw that digital technologies were used for price information systems through SMS messages, which have empowered farmers. And for example, in the central highlands of my country, Peru, SMS disseminated price information increased sale prices from 13 to 14%, especially for crops that are perishable and for which market information is valuable. That's something that we learned there, that the higher the perishability of the product, no matter you have high penetration, still digital technologies will help enormously to reduce the transaction costs and obtain better prices for farmers. But today we're moving into a more dynamic process, which is not just information on prices, but it's also what we call e-commerce platforms, which are improving farmer access to markets. So it's not only getting the information, but also creating the match between the supply and the demand. Increased participation of smallholder farmers in digital economy through e-commerce is key for sustainable development, as it creates opportunities for marginalized groups to benefit from economic growth. We must understand that the smallholders produce products which are different. That's what we call differentiation of products. So having access through e-commerce platforms to the potential demand that prefers that differentiated product provides them an access to market that they didn't have before. The exponential growth of the Taobao villages in China illustrates the potential of e-commerce to generate employment, income, market participation growth, and the Taobao villages have significant annual online sales and also support the growing services sector around them. But we also need to be realistic. An e-commerce platform is not just the digital platform, it's not just the content of the supply and the demand, but also requires the capacity to move the goods. Because once the transaction is done, the commodity has to move. And we need to realize that when we talk and we try to design this type of e-platforms. But digital technologies can also be used for farm-to-fork traceability and for smart contracts, allowing for unmanned, efficient, and transparent automatic transactions in food systems. Digital technologies can also promote financial inclusion, as they allow financial institutions to enter rural markets without establishing a costly physical presence by using client digital profiling, create scoring algorithms, and mobile payments. One of the major problems we face in rural finance is the lack of proper scoring mechanisms for the rural reality, and especially for the agricultural reality with seasonality. Insured farmers invest more than those without insurance, have higher incomes, and can apply for loans linked to the insurance. Even more, we can create access to insurance and condition that to the access to the financial markets to reduce the risk. Acre, a commercial company with a partner network which includes insurers and reinsurance, agribusinesses, microfinance institutions, non-governmental organizations, and input suppliers, offers weather index-based products so that this risk can be minimized. Acre has reached over 1,700,000 farmers in Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania, and insure over 181 million against a variety of weather risks. But let me give you another example that we are working at FAO. In high-value commodities, one of the major challenges we face today is the capacity of storage, cooling facilities. In the staples, we used to have warehouse systems, and we used to link the warehouse systems to the financial system. So today, if we do the same in high-value commodities so that farmers can extend the life of the shelf of their commodity, we can also link these cooling facilities with vouchers, e-vouchers, and link that to the financial system, and also link to the insurance system. So digital technology is an instrument that helps for that. But we have to work hard on creating those interlinkages with the financial system, risk scoring mechanisms, and build institutionality of proper cooling facilities and warehouse design systems of e-receipts to be able to implement this type of interventions. Digital technologies can also improve technical knowledge and dissemination. Extension services now are dynamic, and by using digital technologies, we can create economies of scale. We can have e-clinics for agriculture to resolve problems. We can upload pictures of diseases and have experts around the world to look at them and to bring up solutions that we know that work. This is extremely important today, especially when climate change could be affecting the way the diseases move and the way the diseases adapt to climate change. In Ethiopia, is digitizing its agricultural extension system by establishing a toll-free farmer hotline using SMS and more sophisticated interactive voice response systems to provide technical advisory for 3.6 million users. Finally, the potential of blockchain technologies is enormous. While still untapped, can be immense and significantly improve transparency, trust, and traceability, just to name a few areas of potential application. So, colleagues, yes, digital technologies can bring a lot of benefits, but we need to have the proper content, we need to have the proper institutionality, and it needs to be affordable. Connectivity has improved dramatically in the last years, but still we have a digital divide, and this digital divide remains between countries, between rural and urban areas, between men and women. This divide is further exacerbated by low digital literacy among small farmers. So we need to find out-of-the-box solutions, especially to remove the problem of digital literacy, because that could take several years. We need to find mechanisms in which we can reduce the digital divide, and that's where governments can play a role together with the private sector. There has been very good experiences of minimum subsidy competition to be able to deploy digital areas and broadband technologies into rural areas. The market is there, but we need to unleash the market potential so that the private sector can also understand the potential benefits. And that facilitation, that enabling of environment is also the role of the government. Collectively, we cannot bear the immense cost of this digital divide. The COVID-19 pandemic made clear that now, more than ever, connectivity is a precondition for social inclusion. The data governance dimension is also central in digital transformation of our food systems. New and more sophisticated data governance frameworks are being promoted at country level. In a context where data is the new oil, open data approaches and policies will guarantee a more equitable and efficient digital transformation process. But we need to be sure that the data is of top quality, because it needs to be relevant for our farmers. This makes this joint webinar very timely, and I wish to commend the Indonesian G20 presidency for the leadership in bringing the Agricultural Working Group and the Development Working Group together for the first time to discuss this important issue. We need to improve farmers' access to digital infrastructure and technologies. It is all the more important and pressing to do so in developing countries, where farmers often face even bigger obstacles to access financial services, inputs, and markets. Think this carefully. Infrastructure, we know, and there is solid evidence, reduces inequalities. Digital technologies will help to reduce inequalities by improving access to financial services, to inputs, and to markets. This webinar provides a valuable venue for dialogue and knowledge exchange on initiatives that succeeded to apply digital technologies in agriculture and rural areas and contribute to food security. At FAO, we are working tirelessly to leverage digital technologies for rural transformation. Our job is to make it inclusive. We understand the transformation is happening, the automation process is happening, but we need to match the skill set of our labor supply to what will be needed in our labor demand. We need to create the skill sets. We need to provide the content, the capabilities, and the affordability, the cost. That's where normally we refer as the 3 Cs. So allow me, Excellencies, to share with you 3 examples of our work at FAO. First, we are working on developing the 1,000 Digital Villages initiative across the world. In these villages, we bring all the elements of digitalization needed to support the agri-food system transformation to achieve sustainable development goals. Under the Digital Villages, the 1,000 Digital Villages initiative, villages across the world are converted into digital village hubs. It focuses on promoting the use of digital services portfolio to improve the production and agribusiness management and relate market-oriented and social services in agricultural processes and rural transformation. So we combine the e-agriculture with all the tools that are needed to make agricultural production more efficient, with the e-village so that we can provide services at the village level, but also with the e-cities so that we can create alternative non-farm activities through agrotourism, for example. So that combination, that portfolio of this digital hub is what will increase resilience of farmers and will also allow them to access to market in a more efficient way. Second, in 2019, FAO launched the Hand in Hand Geospatial Platform, a digital public good to create interactive data maps, analyze trends, and identify real-time gaps and opportunities. This geospatial platform enables mapping of agricultural capabilities, highlighting the interaction of economic and social and environmental variables to direct investment. By doing so, it improves investment and targeting and ensures that investments are channeled where they can have the most impact. We today have 52 countries on hand-in-hand initiatives, which are using this technology and this geospatial information system to target and prioritize their investments. Finally, while digital applications can bring about significant gains, the long-run transformative impact, as the related risks, are not yet fully understood. For this reason, FAO has been engaging with its members and partners on how to collectively address opportunities and future challenges through a digital lens, and is working to set up the International Platform for Digital Food and Agriculture. As a member-driven initiative, it aims to provide an inclusive multi-stakeholder forum to promote dialogue on the digitalization of food and agriculture and facilitate the exchange of knowledge and experiences on best practices and policy approaches among all stakeholders. Since the endorsement of the platform terms of reference by the 166th session of the Council in April 2021, FAO initiated the establishment of its operating mechanism, including the Intergovernmental Representative Group. The regional groups are providing nominees to complete the composition of the respective Intergovernmental Representative Group, which will be composed of 27 senior officers and technical experts of FAO member countries. It's important to understand also that we are bringing together other international organizations that will join the advisory committee and initiate an informal global stakeholder mapping exercise to support the online multi-stakeholder forum composition. Please understand that in the digital technologies world, we need to leapfrog. We need to learn from others. We need to know what worked, what didn't work. Not only in the innovation side, in the technology side, in the e-agriculture side, in the e-village side, but also we need to learn about regulation, about institutionality, so that we can leapfrog, especially for countries that have restricted budget, to be able to learn from mistakes of others and to learn from successes of others and adjust it to our realities. This is exactly what this International Platform of Digital Food and Agriculture is trying to do. And FAO, with the support of the members, looks forward to operationalizing this timely initiative. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is crucial that we all, international organizations, governments, and the private sector, and the civil society work together to increase market participation of smallholder farmers, women, and youth. At FAO, we are fully committed to do and to work together with you to a better connected, more efficient, and sustainable society, and to step up the use of digital innovation in an inclusive way, so that we can achieve as soon as possible our challenge of zero hunger by 2030. I thank you, Chairperson, and look forward to the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Torrero, for such a very inspired and meaningful keynote speech for this webinar. Now I would like to ask all speakers, moderator, distinguished guests, and participants to open your camera for photo session. I will lead this session. Please open your camera. On the screen, we have 6 screens. So please be patient. Open your camera and smile. On my count, 1, 2, 3, smile. Next screen, please. Open your camera. Smile. On my count. Again, 1, 2, 3, smile. The third screen. 1, 2, 3, smile. Fourth screen. Open your camera. Open your camera, please. Okay. On my count, 1, 2, 3, smile. The next one. 1, 2, 3, smile. And the last one. 1, 2, 3. Open your camera. Smile. Okay, thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, now we will start the second session of this webinar, a plenary session format for this webinar. All presentation of this plenary session will take approximately 1 hour and continue with question and answer for about 40 minutes. Just a reminder for participants, please use the chat box. I repeat, the chat box for questions. And for speakers and moderator, you can monitor these questions in the chat box as well. Without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. William Tang of Beanstalk to lead this session. But before that, let me read a brief CV of Mr. William Tang. William is an agricultural systems, open innovation, strategy, and policy practitioner. William's work is focused on enabling emerging technology and scaling impactful business models across food production in Australia and Asia, specifically India, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Greater Mekong region. Beanstalk is a leading food and agricultural innovation change agent dedicated to a step change in the agri-food sector across the Indo-Pacific. Prior to Beanstalk, William worked extensively across senior government policy roles focused on agricultural development, resource management, climate policy, and Asia diplomatic relations. William is based in Singapore and supporting leading agri-food companies, governments, and industry associations to drive innovation impact and build a regionally connected agri-food tech ecosystem. William is trained in agricultural economics and farm management systems. Will, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Pak Sahat. And for all the speakers earlier, His Excellency Dr. Sudi Marianto, Director of ECOSEPS, Dr. Kazi Subagiono, Chair of AWG, also Mr. Schneider Shirhan, Chair of DWG, and also, of course, Mr. Maximo Torreira Cullen, Chief Economist of FAO, who just shared some really deep insights around the importance of digital agriculture, and especially during this time where we're expecting there's significant promise of digital agriculture in helping to transform our food system that is much more inclusive and driven by outcomes around sustainability and resilience. As Pak Sahat mentioned, my name is William Tang. I'm based here in Singapore, and so it brings me a lot of pleasure to be speaking from this region and recognize that everyone here today, over 150 people so far here, are calling in from different parts of the world. So thank you very much for your time, whether you're tuning in at the latest nights of hour or early in the morning or during lunchtime. really value your time and also your perspectives and engagement throughout this session. I also would like, I'm really humbled to be sharing and speaking with a panel, Mr. Brian King, Dr. Krishnan Palasan, and also Dr. Anbu, who will be presenting first and foremost and sharing their perspectives of their work on ground and all of the initiatives that they've been tirelessly driving to achieve some of the outcomes we spoke about earlier. And so look forward to introducing each one of them as I welcome them up for the presentation. But before I do that, maybe what I could do is just help set the scene. What do we mean by digital agriculture? What kind of lenses and dimensions do we need to be thinking about digital agriculture? And just to help quickly frame up the session, first and foremost, I, as a curious and agricultural and ag tech enthusiast, I'm here to learn, and I hope many are here today too. And so hopefully some framing questions so that we can get the juices flowing and have a fruitful conversation. So I might share my screen and let me just bear with me while I do that now. Okay, hoping everyone can see my screen. Yes, great. So if so, again, welcome. Really delighted to be talking about this topic about enhancing digital agriculture and rural finance for food security. And I think what some of the points that resonated really earlier around tomorrow's session around rural finance as well is that it depends so heavily on the basic infrastructure around digital agriculture. It helps to enable automation, helps to enable finance, helps to enable deeply connected inputs and produce markets. So what is digital agriculture is an important enabler across the smallholder farmer ecosystem and all the supply chain players in these regions. So just want to anchor that and hopefully get some thinking around the ecosystem as well. When I refer to the, just click next, I refer to the foundations of what is a digital agriculture ecosystem. And I think, you know, Brian, Krishnan, and Anbu will really elaborate on some of these aspects of it. We look forward to kind of pulling these puzzles together and hopefully helping to diagnose where do we focus our efforts and where is the food system requiring greatest emphasis and focus, so that we're really pushing towards an inclusive direction. The first piece of the puzzle, all very foundational, is infrastructure. How do we have the right mobile networks and access? How do we make sure that smallholder farmers and the ecosystem actors have mobile devices to interact and engage with data and communicate with each other? Electricity access and stability is absolutely important. And infrastructure around road and supply chain are also immediate blockers that might seem obvious, but indeed probably the first things on everyone's mind. How do we get produce from A to B, minimizing waste? So unless we're really ironing out some of the infrastructure and the challenges around this region and using data and digital agriculture to help us move towards a smarter system, infrastructure remains an underpinning part of this ecosystem. It's not allowing me to, oh, here we go. The enabling environment, and we had a lot of our policy speakers and regulators here today, and many across aspects of food safety, across data protection and so forth. This is really the crux of pulling together different parts of the ecosystem and government playing an absolutely critical role to bring these pieces of the puzzles together and show coordination, but most importantly, demonstrate and have a similar language around what digital agriculture is and ensuring that we're pushing towards the right directions. Obviously, the important regulation, tax, fiscal policies and the like are fundamental to driving the right behaviors and also driving the right promulgation of right technologies as well. Next one's around economic assets, and I think there was a lot of talk about financial capital and directing investments towards the right areas. an important part of the ecosystem are the investors, both from NGOs, but also from the private sector. How do we direct and engage investors to be investing in technologies that actually drive not just return on investment, but social and environmental outcomes that ultimately impact these value chains, smallholder value chains. Innovation institutions are absolutely fundamental, such as universities, but also incubators and accelerators that are critical to pushing out and driving supply of innovation in the region. People, we talked about talent attraction earlier, talked about how do we make sure the next generation are looking at agriculture as an important sector to focus their efforts and innovations. So again, talent availability, social capital, and ensuring that the sector is bringing together the right people, absolutely important around collaboration too. And finally, networking assets. What sits right in the middle is actually the organizing forces of programs and initiatives and informal networks that help to connect disparate actors in the ecosystem that often don't have the connection between problem and solution, but helping them make that connection. And it's those uncommon collaborations that we hope can shift and bring digital agriculture to its, to a current stage, because we have been hearing about digital agriculture for 20, 30 years now, 40 years since we've seen mobile devices penetrate some of these regions. How do we make sure that the promise of digital agriculture actually helps to deliver the impact that we envision? So just a couple of pieces of the puzzle that gets us thinking. And what we do recognize is that not all countries at the moment, they're at different levels of developing these different pieces of the puzzle. Some are much more advanced in terms of engaging private sector. Some are still at the early stages of building, engaging the youth, engaging, a full suite of the gender spectrum as well to engage with agriculture. Everyone's on a different part of that journey, and I think we alluded earlier, the speakers alluded to the gaps in the ecosystem or the cracks. How do we make sure we're addressing some of those segments? Now, all of this innovation, infrastructure, and the ecosystem really helps to underpin what is a broad range of digital agriculture solutions or use cases. And typically, just to frame it up, we're talking across advisory and information services in agronomy and livestock management and disease management, peer-to-peer smallholder community platforms. We've got supply chain management to help improve and lift logistics, coordination, and linkages to market access and buyer-seller marketplaces, as we talked about. Digital payments, again, something that some cities living here in Singapore, I think, example of where we're finding it's so easy to make a payment, but some of these technologies have hardly taken ground yet in some of these regions. How do we make sure that some of these tools can really penetrate some of these regions in a pragmatic way, and providing digital quality assurance for inputs and produce and so forth. Market linkages, smallholder farmer payment solutions and crowdfunding platforms, again, an important aspect. And finally, macro agricultural intelligence around government agricultural sector tracking dashboards. And we heard the minister speak about that earlier, and also agricultural extension system management tools as well. So this is the full suite of solutions that, when we talk about digital agriculture, I think is important to just anchor ourselves that there's actually many types, and many of these also underpin new forms of agricultural technology to take shape in these smallholder ecosystems. And then another layer I'd like to bring to this is just across the value chain, from a non-digitally native farmer that's transacting and dealing with their loans and finances at the village level, and their inputs are working with local kiosks. Their communications are through, typically community gatherings and conversations. Advisory, it happens through a trusted extension worker in the region, through to very much what we call a digitally enabled and digitally native smallholder farmer ecosystem, that where we're starting to see lots of penetration of technologies like Crowdy, very Indonesia orientation, of course, you can see here, but just contextual. But we're seeing the penetration of mobile apps that are helping to provide peer-to-peer low-interest loans in Jakarta, for example, and broader outside of Java. Also, seed and fertilizer, pesticide price, more transparency and confidence around managing their costs of inputs and growth. Again, communication platforms are becoming very, very common. Using WhatsApp, Facebook, and Line, and everything else. And the list goes on. But this is just very much the upstream part of the smallholder agriculture ecosystem. And then you've got even further down, once you're moving towards trading, data, off-farm, and government solutions, you're seeing so many different solutions starting to take place and shape in these smallholder ecosystems that are providing much more efficiency and empowering decisions back to smallholder farmers that ultimately help to drive, improved incomes and greater climate response and resilience. I like to just point to this example because, an example in Bangladesh where they ran a trial from a group, a four-way partnership with smallholder farmers, farm input retailers, microfinance institutions, and commercial banks. They ran a trial across 53 farmers in the region, and ultimately some of the access to loans and payment formats have allowed farmers to therefore increase, the use of seeds by 23% in a productive way. Applications of fertilizer, again, greater yields being driven on a per hectare basis, and also higher prices and profitability back in the hands of smallholder farmers. And so, and even to the next level, 33% of these farmers opening savings accounts and becoming much more digitally literate. Financial literacy go hand in glove as well. So some of these outcomes and impacts that we're hearing show a lot of promise for digital agriculture. Some of the impacts that we're seeing and we've talked about already, the green being some of the positive, but also would love for these conversations later to also draw out what are some of the risks, some of the overpromises, or some of the potential misinformation or irresponsible lending to farmers that actually might exist, and how do we manage for that and keep that front of mind, as making sure that we're protecting and also promoting fair use of digital agriculture. And probably perhaps the final lens is around reach, making sure that digital agriculture reaches different profiles in gender, age group. It's easy to say that we can get penetration across these regions, but it's often the younger generation that are engaging or working with their parents that might be engaging with technology. How do we break that nexus, or how do we get greater engagement across different ages? And also geography. Often we're seeing technology centralized or being pushed out in closer towards the city and peri-urban areas. But how do we make sure that reach is accessed across countries as well, and smallholder ecosystems? I'll skip this bit here. I think it's quite self-evident in terms of where we're seeing some of the gaps in terms of reach. And the final lens that I'll share with you is that every ecosystem actor has a different role to play in this digital agriculture ecosystem. Some play this role to innovate. Startups, technology providers, universities are there to drive innovation and drive supply. There's those that are advocating and celebrating and making sure that the voices of smallholder farmers as well as technologists are being heard and understood, understanding where there's clear connections and opportunity. Funding, whether it be government or private sector funding, again, a really key element of making sure that all of these pieces connect. Training and sharing knowledge, digital farm literacy and digital literacy, a key component that was discussed already, and connecting and facilitating, playing this really this grease in the wheel of the innovation ecosystem that help to bring these players together. So just a couple of frameworks to get us thinking. I'm sure for many of you, You're very familiar with this already, but for those of you that are just entering this conversation or kind of at the peripherals of digital agriculture, we hope to engage you in some of these questions as well. So hope you find that useful and helpful, and also would love to now be inviting the presentations of some of our distinguished speakers that are sharing much more greater depth of into their fields of work. So if I may, I'd like to first introduce Brian King, who's the platform leader of Big Data in CGIAR. Brian King is recently joined CGIAR unit on data and digital for impact, following 5 years leading the platform for big data in agriculture, a global program of the CGIAR consortium centered on digital transformation of food systems worldwide. He's led programs leveraging successive waves of transformational digital technologies, including establishing early internet networks and policies, building sustainable rural internet, licensing of mobile operators, governance of submarine cables, and cross-border backbone networks, a very diverse field bringing into agriculture, developing digital strategies for public, private, and non-profit sectors, and building more inclusive mobile financial services, most of which are in developing regions. He is also a former agricultural extensionist, so brings boots on ground, lots of dirt on his shoes, and a great experience as a Californian rice farmer. So Brian, I'd like to give you the floor, hand over the floor to you to share a bit about your perspectives. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much, William, and hello, everybody. Really happy to be here. I wanted to delve a little bit into some promising and interesting models, at least for me, that I think might help us set up the discussion a bit more as we get into it together. Here, let's see. I think we're seeing. Okay. So yeah, no, I don't need to introduce myself now. Thank you very much, William. Digital agriculture, as far as I can tell, is about 40 years old. If you review the literature, you can see that some methods are being developed in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, and based on just my own kind of interactions with different experts, have seen that the application of those methods really started to take hold in the 90s, and it's accelerated since then. I think it's also true to note that in the digital agriculture space, it's been challenging to expand beyond very large farms and industrial farming contexts. Now, in the last 30 years, the digital ecosystem that William described, has evolved significantly and transformed significantly, and it's a much different world and a much more digital world. And so, I've got 5 examples I want to spin through, and then look a little bit about the research about scalability, and hope that will set us up for more vibrant discussion. I'm sure it will. So the first of these examples, again, these are ones that are inspiring to me, is Plantix. Plantix is a startup that for 8 or 10 years now has been providing a free service where you can take a picture of your plant, and there's basically a computer vision assisted process of doing a diagnosis and giving you back a diagnosis. In a number of countries where it's used, there are linkages directly to service providers that can help you deal with plant nutrition issues or pest and disease issues. What I like about Plantix is that it's a great example of positive network effects around a digital ag service that can be deployed and used in even very rural settings. And by network effects, in case we don't know, it's really the added value that an additional user, and in this case also an additional image, gives to the network itself, which creates more value and attractiveness for more users to come and join. And network effects can accelerate quite dramatically. So Plantix, in terms of getting to scale, they're a startup, as I mentioned. They're leveraging venture capital funds. They do a number of public-private partnerships where a development agency or a government or someone really wants to sort of target those capabilities to a particular value chain or a particular crop or what have you. So next example. Avazo Talo was one of the early, at least again in my awareness, implementations of interactive voice response for agricultural advisory. And what I like specifically about this case, there are any number of these, and we heard about them briefly from Dr. Torero, is that somebody went through from Harvard Business School and they quantified the value of the advice that was being provided over mobile phones, over interactive voice response. And they found, in fact, that the advice itself had a dollar value or a monetary value greatly above the customer willingness to pay, the rural farmers' willingness to pay. But they did something important in terms of demonstrating and quantifying the value of good advice. So, IVR systems, as I've mentioned, are, a lot of times mobile operators use them as a kind of customer retention strategy. There's some very good providers out there. Viamo, Precision Agriculture for Development was part of this early story. I think they've rebranded to PXD. And so it's a kind of replication story and a kind of value add story around this particular type of delivering advice. Another example I really love is MyAgro. And MyAgro, the thing that really inspires me about this example is that what they did was work within an existing customer behavior, an existing farmer behavior, which is going down to the corner shop, buying a scratch card, scratching it, getting a code, and putting the code into your phone to buy your mobile talk time, your airtime. And basically that same process, but use it to package a layaway product where you're prepaying next season's inputs. So that, smoothing out that ability to purchase, in addition to just making sure there were good quality, genuine inputs available, as would be expected. Really, there are really significant productivity increases and documented increases in farm income for participating farmers. So MyAgro is replicated in 3 countries last I saw, or best I can tell currently. And it's a mix of public and philanthropic investments to help them do this. My understanding is it has a pretty good internal cost recovery, so there's some organic growth as well. This example, picture-based insurance, is something that happened in a project that we were able to support in part under a platform for big data that I led for some years, as you mentioned. And what this does is work within an existing product or existing type of product, in this case, an insurance offering. And what the researchers and the insurance provider did was define the way in which you could guide, started with about 30 or 50,000 wheat farmers initially, guide them to take a picture of their field and make sure there's a pretty good precision about how they're doing that. And I forget the frequency, I think it was several times a week. And so on the back end, what that enabled researchers and the provider to do is train up a machine-assisted capability for recognizing what crop growth stage that particular field was in. You had the location because of the phone. And so they were able to not only, integrate pictures into just the process of, managing claims and so forth for the insurance product, but also to target that advice by, location, farm, and so forth. And so they did a randomized control trial and found that those farmers at least were more interested in paying for the insurance because in large part because they had valued the advisory content. And also, following better practices, it stands to reason that you're managing risk potentially a bit better. And, overall, and in the event you need insurance, of course, you would also be insured. And so this one, again, a public and nonprofit or philanthropic investment done to kind of test and learn around new methods with other providers. And this is being replicated with an insurance provider in East Africa after having got started in India. And the last of the examples on our tour is Digifarm, and Digifarm is a full platform offering, a platform in the sense of a multi-sided network, a multi-sided market, and deployed by the incumbent telecom mobile operator Safaricom, and also in the context where the M-Pesa, very famous M-Pesa mobile money ecosystem and supporting products was already in existence. And so they looked at, again, advice, a layaway product like MyAgro, just some different types of loans, including things like school fees or just personal loans that would affect families' just ability to do things on farm. They facilitated the market access, as we heard about the importance of, as well as insurance. And so they were able to deploy a pretty large scale, and they were also leveraging some significant philanthropic funding. I think MasterCard Foundation earlier on, certainly Gates Foundation at one point. But again, on this testing and learning around new models and ways of serving smallholder farmers, that you really sort of need to be at a scale for it to recover costs and be profitable. So, having spun through our examples, here are just a few bullet points from some of the research around sort of barriers to scale or opportunities to work on scale together, from some research from Kramer, Fabregas, and Schilbach, as well as some research done under my team. And just noting that the public sector must be engaged on. It could be through financing. It certainly could be around being a participant in what it means to be innovating responsibly and providing information responsibly. Creating these digital public goods and collaborating on building these digital public goods is also an area, and we've heard a bit about that today as well. And the importance of this, sort of two-way communication, as it were, with farmers, and the ability to test and learn together around getting services to be the most relevant and meaningful for them. And so just, a bit of a call to action, under the UN Food Systems Summit convened last year, there are several coalitions that came together. One of them is digital. I think it's actually now the Global Coalition for Data and Digital Food Systems, linked to the Coordination Hub for multiple efforts under UNFSS. And so, look out for this coalition. I think it's a really great opportunity to be merging public, private, and nonprofit efforts around, expanding those services. And I think these examples demonstrate how important that is to get that collaboration happening. So thank you. I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing that, and especially sharing them through the lens of 5 real examples of technologies that have been working on the ground. And a couple of thematics there emerged to me around kind of the network effect of developing a marketplace or a multi-sided network. How do we leverage that, and also the use of existing tools such as interactive voice responses and picture-based images that help to enable and unlock other opportunities. Some really great emerging themes that I'm sure we'll dig into a bit later. So thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on that, Brian. And I might take this chance to now introduce our next speaker as well, Mr. Krishnan Palasana. So welcome, Krishnan. And so Krishnan is a sustainable development practitioner and strategist who is leading the India country director role, and as the Asia focal point for Digital Green. Krishnan comes with over 25 years of progressive experience in India, Nepal, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh, having worked in diverse contexts and tackling a variety of development issues. At Digital Green, Krishnan leads a team of about 40 multidisciplinary professionals in the region. As part of the global leadership group, he's facilitating a strategic shift in the focus and priorities of Digital Green's operations establishing newer partnership models and ecosystem initiatives that puts farmers at the center of agtech and ag data discourse. Prior to Digital Green, Krishnan was involved in strategic leadership positions with the Climate Group, Population Foundation of India, and Action Aid International. He lives in New Delhi in India and is also a graduate in physics with an MBA in marketing. I'd like to welcome Krishnan to the floor, and he'll be sharing some insights on the actions on ground that use digital technology to help accelerate positive outcomes for smallholder producers. Welcome, Krishnan.
So much, Phil, and greetings to all the participants from across the globe. Before I go on now, I was in Davis, California last week. Brian was also there, and we were interacting with some local urban farmers. And while speaking to one young woman who is aspiring to be a farmer, we asked her what is the biggest surprise that she had when she signed up to take a training on farming. And the answer was very quick. She told that, of course, I didn't sign up for the amount of math and the calculations that I need to do as a farmer. Now, as we are talking about computing, digital systems, artificial intelligence, sensors and satellite imageries and blockchain, etc., let's also try to keep in our mind the profile of a small-scale farm producer and who is that person is. She is typically has to be someone who is a plant scientist. She has to be a hydrologist. She has to be a weather forecaster. She has to be an accountant. She has to be an entrepreneur. She has to be a salesperson. She has to be a nutritionist. And of course, now we are also expecting her to be a digitally savvy person. And all this put together is one constitutes a farmer, typically one of those 500 million odd farmers of the world who is actually having a couple of acres of land and who is now interested or having the owners the responsibility of ensuring rural productivity, ensuring rural employment, ensuring rural economy that's running well, and also to ensure that there is enough nutritious food in the plates 3 times a day of the bottom half of the global population of about, let's say, about 4 billion people. And that's a huge responsibility that any farmer or a farmer can have. And let that be a humbling feeling to all of us as we are talking about how we can actually help farmers to improve their productivity, their lives, and their incomes. So the whole purpose is technology is not the end of the solution that we are looking at. It's only a means to help those small scale farmers continue to help us live better. Next slide, please. With that introduction, that humbling feeling, I am from Digital Green. Next slide, please. And we are a global not-for-profit with a mission of creating a world where farmers are using technology and data to build prosperous communities. Once again, we leverage the power of technology and power of partnership to help farmers increase income, strengthen resilience, and build agency. And we use technology as an accelerator to advance the sustainable development or sustainable agriculture and development outcomes. Next slide, please. We are headquartered in San Francisco. We are working in South Asia and Eastern Africa, and we've got a global team of about 150 people working. And primarily, we work with the governments in Ethiopia and India, and we have alliance with international institutions and networks, including UN agencies. Next slide, please. There are three principles that we apply on ground. The number one is that in every community, we begin with sitting across the farmers and trying to understand what their needs are. So we typically try to build technology solutions that adapt to the needs of farmers rather than asking the farmers to adapt to the needs of or adapt to technology that we develop. So that's one. The second is we work with governments. And so wherever we are working, the first thing that we do is to get into a partnership with the local, state, or the national government in that region, because so that we are not recreating parallel systems, rather strengthen and work with existing systems. The third thing is, as we are working over the years, we have collected enormous data and we continue to collect that data. And we listen to that data very closely. Not only we, but also we help our partners, that means the governments, as well as the farmers understand the importance of data. So these are some of the three principles that we apply on ground as we are working. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk today about 3 specific examples of our work using digital technology in advancing sustainable agriculture outcomes. The number one is, as an organization, I mean, we are known for highly impactful scaled up initiative of using digital advisories. Now, these advisories are video based. That means local videos are produced by the local farmers talking about their problems and the solutions that they can find for their local problems. And these videos are produced locally and disseminated or shared across to the farming community locally through the local extension system, that is the government extension system. While we originally, years ago, started showing those videos through handheld battery operated pico projectors on ground, we have over the years, we have also expanded it to use other forms of mediums, including IVR, WhatsApp, WhatsApp-enabled chat, artificial intelligence chatbots, and helping farmers to receive personalized advisory at scale. And to do that, we have built the capacities of over 45,000 extension agents in Asia and in Africa. We have reached more than 3 million farmers as we are speaking right now. And over 5,000 videos, small videos have been produced of anywhere from 3 minutes to 15 minutes duration. And those videos are available in YouTube, and they're all open access. Anyone can visit that in the Digital Green YouTube library. And as we are speaking now, there are over 70 million views that we already have in that YouTube library. In addition to that, we also have created all those training modules for use of this digital asset that we are having for frontline workers, and this virtual training facility with complete training packages is being used by more than 4,000 frontline workers as we are speaking right now. So it's an integrated package of digital advisory that comes. Next slide, please. And what we have also noticed is there are multiple evaluations by independent agencies that has happened over a period of time, and we have noticed that there is an increased access to the extension service because of this video-based approach. There is significant gains in knowledge and behavior of the farmers that has resulted in more than 50% increased uptake and adoption of those new methods that we are talking about. And almost all the farmers of the video-based extension has rated it as highly relevant. And plus, to add to that, it is 1/7 the cost of a typical classical extension system that we are having. And the good thing about this video-based approach is that it's not just about go to the field and shoot a video and upload it in the YouTube. It is based on certain very sound principles, theoretical principles, including the positive deviance theory, including the adult learning principles and peer-to-peer learning principles, which helps not only the farmers to see the video and learn from it, but also to have healthy interaction with their peer on ground. So this is the entire video-based approach that we are having. And this video-based approach, in addition to farming, the production-oriented aspects or the productivity-oriented aspect, we are also talking about gender. We are also talking about climate resilience to make the farmers understand about their risk. We are also talking about markets so that farmers can actually navigate the markets in a better way. And the whole idea is how this video, in addition to helping the production, can also improve the agency, leadership, and participation of farmers across the value chain. So this is one big segment that we are focusing is on video-based advisories. Next slide, please. But what happened was that we also noticed that while the farmers are receiving these advisories, it was also very important for them to have enough resources to implement the new techniques, the new methods that they are learning. That brought us to the next level, that how can we actually help these farmers or the farming community to help access funding, access finance in a better way. Next slide, please. So we have noticed that there is this burgeoning ag tech and ag business models in countries like India and as well as across the world, and they rely on data, and most of these initiatives are data extractive in nature. Now, everyone understands the worth and importance of farmers' data except the smallholder farmer themselves. So how can we actually shift the tables around and help the farmers understand the value and worth of their own data, and how can we help them to own and control their data so that they can use it or monetize or have significant gains in the days to come. So we are actually working with farmer organizations, farmer collectives, and we are helping the farmers to collect, own, and store their own data in a digital wallet that they will have, and they will have the agency and control over that data that they are collecting, and they are doing it through the aegis of a farmer organization who are representative institutions of the farmers themselves. And in our work, we are actually incentivizing the farmer organizations to develop a decentralized data system at their own level, and also to help them to build their capacity so that they can start using this data to attract funding in a different way. So once the farmer organizations are collecting the farmer level data, the same data is now being used by the farmer organizations for different purposes. For example, to get a loan from the bank, to get improved inputs for their farmers, to reach out to the market and have better value for their producers, etc. So the whole idea, the premises behind this is, number one, how we can actually help farmers to start collecting, owning, and controlling their own data through farmer organizations. Number two, build the capacity of the farmer organization to use this data effectively so that they can navigate and negotiate better in the markets. And the three is actually prove it to them how this data is actually accessing better financing opportunities for them so that they are able to improve their own productivity and efficiency of operation. So this is the pilot that we are doing. Next slide, please. In India. And the whole thing is very simple. Farmer data collection through some very simple forms at the grassroots level, aided by data collection officers at the farmer producer organization, and this data consolidation that happens at the farmer producer organization level, and then the whole data is now exposed to the market. They're able to see this data, and the market, including the financial institutions, are able to make very appropriate decisions to lend and also serve the farmer organization in a better way. And this will lead to an improved decision-making structure and system at the farmer organization level, and also help the farmers to have better management and growth of their own affairs. We are currently working with 29 farmer producer organizations, and about 36,000 farmers are actually sharing their data on a regular basis, and it's growing day by day. Next slide, please. And the last example that I would like to share as a part of our work is, a farm stack, which is a data sharing protocol farmers. We all know that there are so many institutions, from government to the private sector to the not-profit sector, who are actually collecting farmers' data. The soil department has the soil data, the agriculture department has the farmer profile, the seed company has got the farmers' data, the banks have got the farmers' data, but we seldom find that these data systems don't speak to each other. Now, if there's a way that these data systems can interact with each other without losing the sovereignty as well as the security, and it can lead to much better value-added resources or solutions for the farmer. And that's what FarmStack tries to. Next slide, please. For example, okay, if there is a way that, it's a very simple approach many people are doing, the weather data connected to the soil data, combine it and send out targeted advisories to farmers. This is how we started years ago, by using different data systems to provide targeted information to farmers. Now, recently, we also had another use case where we actually worked with 3 companies: Waycool, a company that is actually procuring commodities from farmers; Samunnati, a company that provides financial services to farmers; and then Satsure, a company that uses satellite-based yield estimation. Now, these 3 companies never interacted with each other before, or never shared their data with each other before. So in the using FarmStack, what we tried to do was to help Samunnati share their farmer profile and the FPO related information with Waycool, and the Waycool, using satellite imageries, were able to decide from which area to procure what commodity. And that also helped Samunnati's financing decision. They know that Waycool is going to buy commodities from these farmers and these FPOs, so it is better that we give them finance, so it's improved their credit rating. So it was a 3-way party sharing their data with each other without any hassle, and thereby improving the services and the value creation that was happening for the farmers because of this data exchange. And what FarmStack provides, next slide, please. What FarmStack provides is data interoperability, providing that necessary protocols and governance mechanisms at the systems level. It's an open source community governed initiative where there will be a steward as well as the practitioners or the users of this facility. The FarmStack also provides the peer-to-peer data connector, which is developed by Digital Green, and along with certain usage policies that will be determined by the owners of that data. And at the farmer level, the most important thing that we have added is that the farmers are able to know how their data is being used, for what purpose their data being used, and also to build in a consent mechanism so that the farmers are able to give informed consent and also able to know what kind of service they are going to avail by providing their data to those agencies. So this is FarmStack. It's an ecosystem solution provider for interoperable data systems without losing the sovereignty or the security. So these are the three areas that we wanted to focus. So I'm highlighting it once again: a digital advisory that helps to build the agency resilience and leadership of participation of farmers, to a data system, a decentralized data system at the farmer organization level that will help the farmers to control their own data and use that data to attract improved financing and improved market relationships. And at an ecosystem level, a FarmStack, a peer-to-peer data exchange and connector that will help create additional values for farmers by sharing data across different organizations and institutions. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for this time and for patiently listening to me. Back to you, Will.
Thank you so much, Krishnan, for sharing your presentation, and again for sharing some really pragmatic projects that that you're working on at Digital Green, and also starting the conversation with that humbling statement around, what it looks like to be in the shoes of a smallholder farmer or a farmer generally. In that, you're required to make some pretty have some really diverse skill sets around plant science, around animal science, around maths, calculation, AI, accounting, and everything else. And I suppose I think that the perspective that you bring on those three initiatives is around farmer empowerment and bringing that education aspect to empowering them to understand the power of their data, to understand how they can use the data to access services, and also bringing all those different parties like Sumanati and Satshore together to help bring value. I think that's some very really great examples there. I'd love to dive a bit deeper later. So thanks so much for sharing that, Krishnan. And this brings us to the final presentation before we embark on a brief conversation after that. So it brings me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Anbu Venkatashalam. Great, thank you. So Dr. Anbu is a Director of Research and Strategy and Innovation at the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, ERIA, based in Indonesia. His previous positions include Senior Capacity Building Specialist at the Asian Development Bank Institute. He was an Assistant Professor at the University of Tokyo, and also a Senior Policy Researcher at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, and Assistant Manager in Pacific Consultants International, based in Tokyo. He has published several books, authored numerous research articles, and produced many project reports on climate policy, sustainable infrastructure design, and private sector participation in green growth. Dr. Anbu was invited as a member of the G20 Task Force on Green Financing, APEC Expert Panel on Green Growth, US-ASEAN Advisory Group on Smart Cities, and the ASEAN Panel for Promoting Climate Resilient Growth. He has taught Agricultural Resource Management, International Cooperation for Sustainable Development, and Finance for Inclusive Growth at the University of Tokyo, where he obtained his doctorate from the University of Tokyo. Dr. Anbu will be speaking to us and presenting on digital transformation of agri-food systems, and looking specifically at policy pathways for greater socioeconomic inclusion, sustainability, and international cooperation. Welcome, Dr. Anbu, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, William. And It is my pleasure to be here today, this evening, and good evening from Jakarta. My intervention is about, I think, Brian and Krishnan mentioned about several cases of digital technologies. The digital technologies, whether these digital technologies can transform the agriculture. That is the question that is I would like to discuss today, and particularly in the context of G20. And the G20 is a group of advanced and the emerging economies. The COVID has also pushed the digitalization everywhere. And the agriculture sector is not an exception. But if you look into the global south, that is the developing countries, they have the multiple challenges. The challenges, they need to produce more to growing population. And also they need to tackle that equity issues that may be sharpened by these pandemics and then other natural disasters. And also we do have the sustainability concerns. So we have been trying hard, and the question here is this agriculture being the oldest industry, how this newest industry, that is the digital or the ICT industry, can help. Here we found, and if you look into this region, and particularly Southeast Asia, and you can find still agriculture is an important in terms of employment, in terms of GDP contributions. So if you look and what are the opportunities and what this digital agriculture promises is it helps these countries, developing countries, to leapfrog this intermediate infrastructure that has been built during the industrial ages. The second promise is the vast of knowledge spillover that can happen during the internet. We had seen it, and just Brian and Christian mentioned about it. And third one is the taking advantage of the new markets offered by these digital platforms. This is a kind of a promises, but whether these promises can be accessible, that is a question. But if you look into this the technologies, and here we have a wide spectrum of digital technologies and the data management systems that has the potential to improve the profitability. The intensity of the technologies varies across the countries, but if you look into this last 10 years, what happened was the technology is evolving and the data structure is evolving. And this is a kind of a category of technologies and the data structures we have. And at the global level, we have the data storage technologies, analysis technologies, and also transfer and sharing technologies. If you come back to this region, and we did a study, and we evaluated the ecosystem landscape that is available in Southeast Asia, and we found there has been slow but steady growth of the technologies such as drones and then remote sensing technologies. When these technologies are combined with these digital payment systems and then e-commerce platforms, and as well as also supply chain traceability systems, they improve the farm profitability. And it enhances the quality of these rural people. And there are growing evidences to show that they improve the profitability and also they alleviate the poverty. But at the same time, we need to acknowledge more has to be done, basically to upscaling these models, which are the working in isolated pockets. On the other hand, if you look into these advanced economies of the G20, and here basically in US, and we found that data-driven approaches has been exciting the agriculture business process. enhancing the farm productivity, and also improve these artificial intelligence systems, improve the market transparency. And if you look into that European Union, and we have this smart rural areas, it's a kind of integrated approach towards these rural livelihood conditions, where they enable the efficient logistic systems. If you come to Japan, and we found in 2017 an agriculture data platform. It was started as a kind of public sector platform to share this is data. Has been now it has a kind of transformed into a stakeholder driven data platform. So this is called Vagri, and here they have three functions basically. One is that is the data collaboration function, wherein this collaboration among the different agriculture ministries and then industries, and as well as the sensor-based vendors are taking place. Previously, it was owned by the industry. Now the farmers can also access it. Second thing is the Vagri, these platforms also have a kind of a sharing function where the data can be shared under certain rules among these different stakeholders that will help in the productivity improvement at the farm level. Third one is also, it is a data providing functions. It directly help the farmers in having the soil information or the weather information or the market conditions. So we do have kind of best examples. And if you look into these examples, there are pathways for the productivity gain and also the allocative efficiency. And here this it happens at the on-farm level and also the off-farm data management systems. At the on-farm level, and these technologies has resulted in the better allocation of the physical, natural, and the human capital that automatically translated into productivity gains. And if you look into this off-farm system, the data management systems, where access to the data and the payment systems become a core point, basically they reduce the transaction cost in searching for the alternatives, contracting with the vendors, and as well as monitoring it. Basically, it improved the allocative efficiency in Europe, in Japan, in USA. But the challenge here is whether these things were resulted in the equity and the sustainability. This is where more effort has to be done. And particularly when coming to this developing South, and here how this digital technologies can accelerate the transformation, how it can bring the equity, how it can increase the productivity, and how it can improve the sustainability depends upon the three factors. One is the availability of these technologies that could be translated into your bandwidth conditions, whether it is a 3G or 4G, or your affordability and how much the tariff that is you have, for example, mobile phones, or these inequalities, and then enabling environment, what type of macro policy environment that is you have, whether you are providing the farmers enough basic skills or access to the electricity or the online services. Here we found the countries in this region has widely differ. For example, these green colors are where there is more than 75%. For countries like Australia, it is 86.6. And this yellow color, it is in the range of 50 to 74, 75, the scale of 0 to 75. And then the orange, it is a 25 to 44. And if you take the case of Indonesia, and here it has different stories to tell. For example, in the enabling environmental maximum, I think it has a score of 72.5. On the other hand, affordability, the tariffs are coming down, and it is 6.2. On the other hand, in the availability, still the rural areas of Indonesia has the capacity problem. So I will later explain how this enabling environment has been created through the policy coordination. But if you look into these digital realities, there is a huge gap between the advanced economies and the developing countries within the G20. Here, if you look access to the internet, it is 87% in the developed countries. But on the other hand, it is only the 47% in the developing countries. And if you go for the LDCs, it's 19%. We do find gender gaps. Gaps is small in developed countries of Europe and US, but it is very large in the developing countries of the South and Southeast Asia. Then we do have the network coverage, and here 93% of the global population and is living with this reach of the mobile broadband. But if you look into the farmer rural areas, only 13% of the farmers use this internet in Indonesia. The mobile phone subscription, about 67% of the global population, but only 15% of the annual growth is happening in the advanced countries. So it shows the vivid gap. And in spite of this gap, and if you look into the countries like Indonesia, and it provides an opportunity, and it provides an imperative for going for the digital transformation. And it can provide this equity, and it can provide the inclusion. Take the case of Indonesian agriculture sector. It still employ nearly 29 or 30% of the employment. And then 85% of the farmers are in the active group. And for them, actually, the increasing the land productivity and the labor productivity is a primary concern. And 61% of the farmers are graduated from the primary school. Here, the digital literacy is a problem. It is a challenge. So what is the challenge? What is the confusion of these farmers? And that is also this digital transformation, or the digitalization of agriculture has accelerated during the COVID period. And Brian mentioned about 5 models, and this is more than multiple models exist. And this farmer, which is the characteristic, a small-scale farmer, has also witnessed the previous revolutions, agriculture revolutions, mechanization, he has witnessed. But the confusion here is, and he wants to new growth. He wants to have a prosperity, and whether this digital agriculture can provide that environment. To be successful, the small-scale Indonesian farmer must grow as much as in his land. He has to reduce the risk of crop failure, and he has to minimize the operating cost, and to sell the crops for the right price, and effectively managing his inputs. Whether this digital transformation, this data and the technologies can provide that opportunity. This is the challenge, and this is the confusion we have. But Indonesia, and here we see that is the several examples. The digital agriculture services is happening in the farming sector, on-farm sector, like a remote sensing, and the fertilizing of the drones has been introduced on the pilot basis in the Java. And also it has been supported by creating another digital agriculture services that aggregate and progressive, and they gather the real-time data that can be connected to the farm work management systems, which will enable a platform that automatically schedule these relevant interventions by the farmers as well as the markets. Here you can find there is due to this support by the private sector, as well as the aided by these academic institutions, several innovations are happening, and they particularly in the development of the application that helps the farmers to control their inputs and then enhance their market conditions. So these tools it is a kind of a public and private partnership aided by the academia. And here we found these things basically enhance the quality of the life of the farmers, and as well as they're increasing the profitability. This has been done. I think we had seen that is Indonesia has the highest enabling environment. That is a policy environment. It is about 62.5 in the score. How it is happening? Here there is 3 ministries that is coming together. One is the Ministry of Agriculture, which is focusing on improving the productivity, the precision farming. They have an approach for enlarging or upscaling the precision farming, and also Agriculture War Room, that is the Secretary General mentioned about it, and also the capacity building for the digital agriculture. This has been synergized with these developmental goals by the PEPNAS, which focus on the sustainable development goals. So here there are several initiatives driven by the private sector and the corporate farming, and also financial access and that agricultural insurance schemes has been enlarged. And also there is a smart village program that has been initiated by the Ministry of Communications. So this high-level policy coordination help this digital revolution accelerate. But at the same time, we do have the challenges. If you look into this enabling environment that can transform this adaptation of this digital technologies, we found there are several factors that governs it. Not only the macro policy environment, there is also micro policy environments like the personality of the farmer, his age group which he is, and education, gender, and willingness to take risks, these factors. And another is the future of the farm. What is the size of your farm? And also financial conditions of the farmer, and his resource endorsements to invest on the digital agriculture. Third factor is the social interactions, the social capital, the collective responsibility of the particular village, or their binding relationship among the farmers. That also matters. And also supporting institutions, how these farming communities collaborate with the local academic institutions, bring the technologies, bring the knowledge, and as well as upscale their own initiatives, innovations. So other factors also include the legal environment. And here we found the laws and regulations. Sometimes we found at the micro level, at the local level, some of the macro policy conflicts we found. And also this attribute, another attribute is the future of the technologies, the ease of the use of the technologies, and the complexity of the systems. So these factors made to be mentioned. That's why our basically we are helping a policy brief for the G20, and basically it is a conclusion of that policy brief. If you are looking for a transformation, that is bringing the productivity increase, bringing the equity and the sustainability, we need a three classification of the policy interventions. One is the tier 1 policies, which look into this availability, improve the availability and the accessibility of the digital and other physical infrastructure. The tier 2 policies is more about creating an enabling environment. This access to that data, availability of the digital platforms and the digital systems, and as well as these digital skills. These things could come within the agriculture sector, or it could be supplemented by the other sectors, like communication technologies. Third one is that it's a public support mechanisms that include facilitating a broader adaptation of these digital technologies, and as well as the capacity building of the farmers. So if you summarize here, and our question is whether digital transformation can help the developing countries. Our answer is yes, but we need policies, we need a public-private partnership and innovations that can empower the farmers. So I stop here and I'll come back for the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Anbu, and especially bringing a very kind of holistic lens around the types of policies and those tiers, even as you speak through them. You know, how do we go from foundations to make sure that we're actually building and creating that enabling environment to allow the private sector and innovators to actually have a much more smoother pathway to impact and engaging with smallholder farmers. So thanks for sharing that. And it brings me great pleasure now to shift our gears a bit, and I encourage also the audience to. We've got 2 questions arise so far, but I bet you after that those few conversations that were really pragmatic and practical that there's many on the way. So feel free to get your fingers warmed up and type away some questions, and we've got a few coming through there. But maybe just to kick this off first, I might just start with one quick question, because it was a thematic that almost all the speakers touched upon, is that we've you know, recognized that digital agriculture has been around for some time, over the last 30 years, stretch of 30 years. And it's the focuses have shifted. Yes, it's gone from more precision ag and then kind of mobile communication platforms and so forth to now much more enabling technologies that can underpin automation and, you know, deep data analytics and so forth. My question here for the panel is, what makes today different to the promise of digital agriculture 20, 30 years ago? And are the barriers similar or different? So just a really quick one, and I know Brian, you've already emphasized some of these things around personalized data and allowing much more nuance around how we tailor solutions for farmers. So if that helps kick the conversation going, I might hand over to you, Brian, for a quick response, and also from the rest of the panel. So thank you, Brian.
Happy to. I think, yeah, happy to. I think, you know, personalization at scale, even in very rural, low-income contexts, is possible. So that's certainly one thing that's changed thanks to the mobile revolution. I'd say, you know, greater access and pretty ubiquitous access now to computational power and advances in analytics. And then, you know, satellite data itself becoming, you know, greater spatial and temporal resolution to be sort of more fit for purpose for agriculture. So these aspects of the technology dimensions of the ecosystem, at least, have, you know, have advanced and evolved really significantly. So I think that's what makes it different today. And I think we're just in a much more, you know, digitized economy and society worldwide than we were 30 and 40 years ago. Over.
Thanks for that, Brian, and some perspectives also on the barriers. Are the barriers that we're trying to overcome back then versus now similar or different when it comes to farm level adoption and scalability?
I think they're similar. I think that we've just as a community, and this is, I'm just venturing some thoughts here, but you know, as a community, we've learned about the importance of user-centeredness and human-centeredness, even beyond presupposing that communities we want to be a benefit of will necessarily be users. And so, you know, adoption and diffusion of innovations is something that, you know, it can be challenging. And I think there's similar challenges 40 years ago as there are today. I think part of the evolution in the ecosystem that is hopeful for me is that we're sort of disrupting a bit or moving away from just being able to do these things in industrialized farming contexts with, you know, full R&D budgets and very large farms and so forth. So, yeah. Over.
Thanks for sharing that, Brian. Any others would like to kind of answer that from the panel? Krishnan, Anbu?
Yes, and I have a slightly different view, and here in the long run, and this digital technologies bring prosperity, and it will have a more impact when compared to other type of technologies that happened we can say the second generation of mechanization. But the thing is, the technology is not a panacea. Here it is always a constant innovation. It is happening up, and the cost will be reducing. But what the farmer want, and this is he wants a profitability, and he wants that is less inputs, and maybe the income, and whether that is a kind of outcome, and that is what we are looking for, and this outcome has the trade-off. And here that is the solution. Here is the same type of barriers exist, more opportunities exist, but the thing is, what is the trade-off? And the second thing is whether it is meeting these aspirations of the farmer. I think that is the question that is we need to think about it.
Fantastic. Thanks for that perspective, Dr. Andrew. I might also revert to a couple of questions that are showing up here. I know they're starting to come in hot. One question for Mr. Krishnan Pamasana. You mentioned that you work in many regions, including East Africa. Do you assist governments strengthening their institutional capacity? Example, regulatory frameworks that govern data management, data ownership, and issues related to privacy. That comes from Nur Abdi. Oh, just I think you're still on mute.
I'm sorry for that. Yeah. Thanks for this. I've quickly typed down my answer also in the chat bar. Yes, we do work. We are currently working in Ethiopia and Kenya, and you will find the contact details in our website. Please reach out and we'll be happy to discuss further. Yeah. Can I also take this opportunity? There was one more question that was again directed to me. It is from a colleague in Indonesia. You know, the question is, Indonesian farmers are dominated by older generations who have limited access to technologies, etc., etc. Yes, it's true. I mean, this is something that we face in various other parts of the world also. And one challenge that we are facing is the lack of interest or inability of the younger generation to get into the agriculture space is a major concern. Having said that, there are a couple of things. Number one, a farmer, they're quite smart. They're much smarter than we are, actually. They're wise, old, and intelligent too. So they will surely adapt and adopt things that they find immediate value or benefit. One classic example I can give you is when we started doing IVR-based targeted advisories to potato farmers in Bihar. And when the farmers started realizing that these advisories are actually helping them to significantly reduce crop loss, and we found many other farmers who otherwise wouldn't have invested in a mobile phone, actually buying a cell phone worth, at that point of time, about $80 to $100, so that they understood, realized the value of that, and they started getting these messages by themselves also. So people do change, people do adopt, and we have also found that in spite of all these things, there are challenges, and that's where the role of the extension officers comes into play. The progressive farmers in the villages comes into play. They can actually act as the conduits or act as the inspirators or the intermediaries to help those older farmers who might not have access to technology. So there are various ways and means in which we can do that. Thanks. You're on mute now, Bill.
Great, thanks. Krishna, thanks for that. And I know in your presentation, you also shared about all the quite visual and quite modern ways of communication with farmers that are engaging through FPOs. You're working with quite a number of FPOs as well. When you refer to kind of trusted advisors, do FPOs come into that remit? And I think that allows you to reach 35,000 smallholder farmers. I think it was the numbers that you're referring to. Is that quite a similar approach? Can you share a bit more about that context in terms of trust?
Yeah, the FPOs are at this point of time, FPOs are not involved in developing or sending out advisories. Okay, FPOs are more involved in what we call as market linkages, and including the financial market as well as the commodity market. The advisories goes through the government extension system, and in India alone, we have reached more than 2 million farmers through that government extension network that we have, right? And when this advisories, those videos that goes through the government extension system, automatically become a trusted source of information for farmers, right? So, and the reason being, those advisories that go through the government extension system also goes through a process of vetting and quality check. So each and every video that is produced and that is sent out to farmers through that extension system is approved by the various technical committees at the government, so that farmers are not getting misinformed, or they are not getting information that will be detrimental to them. Yeah. So that's how it is done. So in future, we do think that yes, FPOs might also get into advisory, but at this point of time, they are much more into input and output services rather than advisories. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for that
Hope it
response,
answers,
Krishnan.
yeah.
I have a question from the crowd, and a very grassroots question. I'd like to ask, this comes from Gina Salma Al-Ghania. Should like to ask Mr. King. She has an existing modern poultry farm, closed house, consisting of 250,000 population of broilers, commercial in Subang, one of the rural areas in Indonesia. Honestly, my farm is on the way to scale up, so we are developing innovations, but the obstacle is always coming from financial support and limitations of experimental technology, such as labs. So could you give us some advice for these problems? These are most common problems in the farmer world. Thanks for the question, Gina.
Thanks, Gina. Yeah, I tried to go. These are things that we would call, ecosystem level or an enabling environment kinds of challenges. Access to finance, the ability to test and learn and try new methods or try new technologies, and then within your existing farming businesses can be very limited, and for obvious reasons. And then access to the third part of that question about laboratory, I thought that might have also meant laboratories that could be supporting operations like hers, and so being able to sort of test and learn with another institution. And so solving these, we need to be solving these challenges in an intentional way. Maybe there could be an entry point for some of these sort of collective, trusts or FPOs or cooperatives or what have you, in doing this at a with an immediacy and a scale that would be relevant to something like what Gina's trying to solve. But they're kind of systemic issues or ecosystem level issues that don't actually give me anything to say about how to solve those particular challenges for Gina today, sadly.
Right, thanks for that perspective. Actually, I would like to draw on some of the things that Krishnan and Anbu also mentioned around, in fact, you mentioned as well around, there was a lot of talk about public-private partnerships and bringing in kind of these groups on shared challenges. And I think you also mentioned in a pre-competitive environment, how do we catalyze some of these partnerships so that there are access to infrastructure, that fundamental infrastructure that can uplift production facility and access to new genetics or feed regimes, etc., that actually underpin food security. So I mean, I'd like to just kind of sit on that for a second and see if Dr. Anbu and even Krishnan has some perspectives on that. Dr. Anbu, any thoughts and perspectives, or happy to move on to the next question too?
Yeah, could you please elaborate, pinpoint and
Yeah, so the question from Gina was one around access to, I suppose, laboratories that typically require significant investment whether it be from private or public. How do we also help to catalyze some of these partnerships to make sure that there's, I suppose, greater engagement from public and private, to make sure, producers, probably on the larger end in this case with Gina's 250,000 head poultry farm, but how do we make sure that some of those partnerships come to bear and actually support some of these organizations?
I think if you look into the current trends and basically the marriage between this oldest industry and the newest industry is happening up, and here the challenge here is the capital. If you are talking about the digital agriculture in the large scale, and this capital cost is high, and I think then the return period is longer, and how we can shorten it, and I think that is where this is the risk sharing mechanisms comes in, and basically there is the public finance could be leveraged, and it is a kind of leverage financing, and public sector put $1 and then the private sector put another 10. I think the private sector doesn't want to lose this. They don't want to be the first loser, and I think here the role for the public finance comes in. And the second thing is also there is a financial innovations, and that is happening in many parts of the Asia and also these African countries, and this kind of a microfinancing that is upscaled to that cooperative level, and here basically that is the banking sector and the communities, and as well as the private sector, and that is the institutional investors. These kind of models are evolving. It is a kind of crowdfunding model, and that can help and that can share that risk. But the third one is here this one, when we think about that, is the most important part is this the small scale farmers. What type of challenges they face? It is completely different when coming to the big farmers. And we know that is we need to acknowledge the fact that is the agriculture continues to be more knowledge intensive or more high tech, and it will demand for the more precious and timely information and the finance. And here there is one question about Indonesia and what this digital revolution means for these small scale farmers and as well as the labor market. And here we see that is this precision agriculture and the big data, using the big data for the precision agriculture improves the profitability. And we also know that digital soil maps, remote sensing, and these technologies are needed for the modern farmers. But the requirement for the small and large farmers are quite different. And here we need to give them access to the technologies and access to the finance. And there are different ways of doing it. And Indonesia is also one of the cases. And in the short run, there will be a kind of a labor market changes, and we need to acknowledge the fact there will be losers. Though that is in the long run, it has an impact, the positive impacts, but in the short run, there will be losers. We need to compensate, or we need to develop a safety net for these losers.
Thanks for that perspective, Dr. Anbu. There is a question here just earlier about, just Phila, if it's okay to just flick one slide up. Yes, thank you. Actually, a question for Mr. Krishnan Palasana. Technology is a mean and not the end. How can we make sure that digitization of agriculture takes into account the need for a transition to sustainable food systems and contributes to it? How can the environmental and social impacts of digital agriculture be monitored?
Thanks, William. Again, I replied my answer onto the chat box itself. I mean, it's a profound question. It's a very good question also, right? And there is no shortcut answer for this. What we also need to develop as we move along is to come out with some clear governance principles and standards that will be applicable across the sector to ensure that those risks that we are talking about, including the risks to environment, the risks to climate, etc., are very well understood and maintained. There is a need for curated content that goes across. And my simple suggestion, I mean, there's no shortcut answer, as I mentioned right now, and it can be, and these standards and principles can be culture specific, regional specific also. It need not be one global standard, because agriculture is not one all-encompassing single entity the world over. So, but what is most important here is to ensure that all those protocols, standards, guidelines, and governance mechanisms are developed in consultation with farmers. I mean, that is the most principal thing, because they understand the soil, the nature better than anybody else. So that's what I would suggest as we move along. Thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Krishnan. I'm going to be a bit selfish here, and I mentioned at the start that I did have a lot of things I scratched my head on, and I'm still thinking very actively. One of the questions that I had actually, and probably emerged out of the last 6 months, attending a range of different conferences, especially technology conferences around agriculture and our value chain in this region. Often I hear this reference all the time to unicorns, unicorns, and unicorns, and this over obsession about growing high value agri-tech companies, and that this is going to be the next revolution in agriculture, biggest promise. And in my head, that's I find that challenging, because often valuation is not necessarily the right way to go, as we know that the on-ground implications of building infrastructure and then potentially the risks associated with pulling back or failure is actually very high in some of these regions that become dependent on this. So my question is around, what do you think is the right driver that investors, particularly the venture capital and the new age investor that are looking to change our food system, that are looking for a positive social environment to impact, as well as strong return on investment? What's the right metrics that help us obtain greater success in digital agriculture? Just a quick thought around, and I'm happy for anyone to answer that or move on. Thank you.
Have a go. I think when we talk about a unicorn, you're talking about at least in the sort of VC world, it's 20x, just astounding, massive growth that you can see in sort of more digital business models, social media and the like. And in agriculture, I just don't feel like that's quite the right way to be framing it. I think, and particularly when we're talking about agriculture to reach smallholder farmers, I think really frameworks for looking at impact investing, double bottom line investing make more sense. The most accessible of the examples that I presented, of those 5 that I spun through, was able to do what they did because it was an incumbent telco that had an existing mobile money ecosystem that they could sort of deploy into. But one thing I didn't mention is that they have way more attractive lines of business than serving smallholder farmers. And I have no doubt if there's some major crisis or something, the line of business serving smallholder farmers could well be the first to go. And so, it's this impact and resilience framing around finance, around performance, I think just makes greater sense, particularly for what we're talking about in terms of being valuable for smallholder farming communities. Ober.
Thanks for that, Brian. I think Dr. Anbu, you've got your hands on your lips and excited to speak.
So, yeah, and I think that's a good question. And the thing is, my thought is like this, and this unique answer, and when coming to the agriculture, is very technology specific. And the market is still niche market and a small market, and so this market will be growing if the community, particularly that is the education and the literacy and the necessary skills that is needed for this digital adaptation is increased, and I think that is the basic foundation, and that has to be provided by the public sector, and I think there is a role for the private sector, but the first step has to be taken by the public sector. And the second thing is we analyze it as some kind of type of unicorns and type of impact financing that is happening, and we found it's happening by the millennials. There is a they are more care about the environment, and their kind of value system is quite different from the old generation. And here I think it has to be encouraged, and it has to be supported by the regulatory and the oversight agencies, providing the adequate guidance and also this concessional financing will bring the stability and unlock these untapped potentials. But at the same time, we need to take into the consideration, out of 10 startups, we have the statistics to show that is only 4 come out, and other they die down, and that we need to see that is the reasons why they fail and what is happening in the Death Valley. And we need to avoid it. So these models are upscaled.
Thanks for sharing that perspective, Dr. Anbu. I've been told that we have 5 minutes left. I know we could keep going, but I'd like to have the last question here from the screen. And it's I know it's directed at Dr. Anbu, but I think it's something that all of us, everyone at the panel has shared some perspective on, and I'd love for everyone to just give a 1 to 2 minute quick summary of what you think is your answer to this. So, can we liken the current agri-tech revolution in Asia to the green revolution in the 1960s? What would you say are the key success factors or lessons for other developing countries, especially in Africa? This comes from Nur Abdi, and so a quick sum up from everyone. And I might start with you, Krishna.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that question. That's quite interesting, and I would say that it can be. I mean, in fact, people are also talking about the latest digital boom or the internet revolution as the 4th industrial revolution that is happening, and obviously it is having a huge impact on the agriculture sector also. Now, what is going to be a big driver is how we are actually driving digital literacy, so that that 500 million odd small scale farmers that we are having are able to reap the benefits of this digital boom that is happening right now. So invest in digital literacy is one thing that I would surely suggest. Yeah.
Thanks, Krishnan. And over to Brian.
I mean, the digital boom is led, at least in part, by startup, ag tech startups, and at least according to a bit of research that we did, we found that startups have a real hard time actually understanding farming contexts. They don't tend to come from farming contexts, and so the green revolution, if there's a now digital green revolution, obviously the risks around inclusion, the risks around not leaving smallholders behind are there, and we've talked about them already. I think if there's one intervention, it's around more active industry facilitation across these divides, across startups, smallholder communities, governments, and so forth. And so yeah, actually this gets a bit to an earlier question about how do we make sure that we're being responsible with digital innovation more broadly. And again, that too is a multi-stakeholder process where we test and learn and iterate together kind of across those boundaries.
Thanks for your perspectives on that, Brian. And last bit goes to you, Dr. Anbu.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, and there is a fundamental difference between the green revolution and the digital revolution, and Brian already mentioned. And what happened? The green revolution. It happened at the on-farm level, and supported by the public sector, providing the inputs and then irrigation facilities, and then fertilizer. It is a kind of on spot. But if you look into the digital revolution, it is happening along the value chain, and from the production, marketing, and then distribution. So the nature is different. So we need a different type of strategy and approaches, and to make it inclusive. And I explained what will be the opportunities, what will be the promises of the digital agriculture, but it may further increase the inequality. And if you don't make it, and for example, what's happening in the rural area, there is infrastructure deficiency and the literature, it can further enlarge this digital the divide, the inequities. And also you can see there is unintended consequences of the revolution. And what happened, what we have seen in green revolution, the 1960s. It happened, and the government provided the subsidies and then inputs. The farmers, they increase their productivity and they become prosperous. But at the same time, after 20 years, 30 years, they found their groundwater is polluted or depleted. So similarly, there may be still nobody has studied it, and there may be unintended consequences of digitalization at the local level. So we need to have a kind of integrated approach and learn. And one thing is we can think, and for the digital revolution, it is basically happening in the agriculture policies. But in the digital revolution, we need a coordination with this innovation policies, ICT policies, maybe trade and finance policies. So here we need a much more integrated policy support, and more policy coherence is needed.
Great. Well, thanks very much for that, your perspectives on that, Dr. Anbu. And I think across all three panelists pointed to the real big promise and opportunity that sits in front of us, but recognizing also that we're dealing very much with a biophysical system that has bounds and that has a time element to it that often we don't realize until 20 years down the track we can be learning from that. So it's quite a unique beast. I think that's why it keeps us all awake every night, problem solving and passionate about this sector. Certainly does for me. And so I know we're wrapping up here. I'd like to sincerely thank our panelists here today. I'd like to thank Mr. Brian King from the CGIAR. I'd like to also thank Mr. Krishnan Palasana from Digital Green, and also Mr. Venkatashalam Anbu, Dr. Anbu as well, from the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia, ERIA. I think all these presentations will be shared as per the chat. Thank you very much for sharing this conversation, and I really value the open conversation. I also like to hand it back to Pak Sahat, who somehow I forgot to mention earlier. It was the first time I've ever seen someone take a picture of 160 people in such a swift and seamless fashion and got everyone smiling. So congratulations to you, and for this, and for just really the great facilitation and support as well. I know you got an amazing team behind you, so thanks for everything. And of course the DWG and AWG. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Will, for such a well-organized presentations. And also thanks to all speakers, Mr. Brian King, Mr. Krishnan Palasana, and Mr. Venkatachalam and Bumochi for sharing experiences and knowledge, as well as thanks to all participants for your active engagement during the discussion. On behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to present our token of appreciation for your supports. The first one goes to Mr. Brian King of CGIAR. Thank you to Mr. Krishnan Pallasana of Digital Green. Thankful goes to Mr. Fekata Salam Anbumoji of India. And last but not least, our token of appreciation goes to our moderator, Mr. William Tang of Big. Now we come to the end of day one of this webinar. On behalf of the organizing committee, we'd like to express our sincere thanks to all participants, invited speakers, and the moderator for your attendance and contribution in this webinar. It is a pleasure to have you with us. This concludes the webinar. Thank you all for attending. We hope you have learned and enjoyed this presentation. Once again, we'd like to invite you to join the second day of the webinar tomorrow, that we will start at the same time as today at 16 or 4 p.m. sharp Jakarta time. Stay safe. Thank you and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.